Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Bite Size Cybercrime, the podcast where we discuss cybercrimes and cybersecurity news. This week we will be discussing SIM swapping, which is a type of attack that some threat actors can use to bypass SMS-based multi-factor authentication. SIM swapping attacks have been on the rise lately, and recently several employees at multiple phone carriers, including T-Mobile and Verizon, came forward and shared messages from alleged threat actors offering to pay them $300 to perform a SIM swap. Supposedly, they got the employee phone numbers from an employee directory, and according to T-Mobile's newsletter, The Mobile Report, this information was likely from a prior data breach. The reason this is believed to be the case is also because, according to the Mobile Report, many of the people contacted haven't been employed at T-Mobile for many months. So, the data is at least a few months old, and it could potentially be even older than that. Either way, it does not appear to be a very current directory. These text messages are coming from many different numbers with many different area codes, and it's rather difficult for that reason to pinpoint what threat actor specifically is making these solicitations. It could be an existing ransomware affiliate group, or just a completely independent actor, or it could even be multiple different groups sending these messages now. But what exactly is a SIM swap? A SIM swap is a type of attack where a hacker transfers your phone number to a different SIM card, one that they have possession of. Typically, this is done by calling the phone carrier, pretending to be you, and saying that you need to transfer your number to a different SIM card in your brand new phone. There's supposed to be measures like security questions or pins to prevent this from happening, but that information could be phished from the target or just guessed, or the employee could be pressured into transferring the number without any further verification. However, if you get a disgruntled employee that's happy to receive $300 and risk their job, all that verification goes completely out the window. A SIM swap is most often performed to compromise an account that has multi-factor authentication turned on. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, is authenticating or signing in using two different factors. The factors that are most commonly used are something you know, like a password, something you are, like a fingerprint or scan of your face, or something you have, like a smart card or a smartphone as evidenced by the one-time code you received. If you have used multi-factor authentication, you're likely familiar with being sent a temporary access code to log into a website or app, either to your phone or your email address. The issue with receiving codes via text is that if a hacker is now using your phone number, they can sign in as you if they already know your password, receive the code in exactly the same way you would, and compromise your account. Depending on how many texts or phone calls you receive, or how much you use your mobile data, you would eventually notice that something has gone very wrong. Because with your SIM card no longer active, you won't be able to send or receive text messages or phone calls or use your mobile data. The big thing that people could steal is banking information. Many banks still use SMS-based multi-factor authentication, and a lot of money exchanging apps do as well, like PayPal. What's important to note is that the attacker also needs your password to be able to authenticate to either of those, which is why I stressed in my credential stuffing episode recently that it is important to actually have different passwords for different websites, at the very least for anything involving your money. So, the question arises, does this mean you should stop using multi-factor authentication if it's this vulnerable? And the answer is no, definitely not. Weak multi-factor authentication is better than no multi-factor authentication at all. Even if it's not the strongest layer of defense, it's still putting another layer an attacker has to bypass to completely compromise one of your accounts. What I prefer to do when possible, and I recognize this is not applicable to every website in the world, is use a separate multi-factor authentication app on your phone. The codes sent to this app are not able to be intercepted by a SIM swapping attack because they do not come in the form of an SMS text message. I personally use an app called Authy, which used to have a desktop version that was discontinued, which makes me sad, but Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, and Aegis are also well known and recommended. I'm actually looking to switch mine soon, so I'm doing a bit of research. The only thing I would say is just be wary of fakes. Some people make fake authenticator apps to harvest credentials, so do some research, use an app that is trusted. I like looking at technology review websites, comparing my options, kind of correlating results from multiple websites like that. However, when it's not possible to use a separate authenticator app, I would recommend either switching to something like biometric authentication instead of that, or just being aware of the signs of a SIM swapping attack. If you've noticed you can no longer text or call anyone, first of all, rule out any tech problems, do a reboot, turn on airplane mode, turn it off again, make sure your data's on, the whole 9 yards. You should probably contact your mobile carrier just to make sure everything's good. Thank you to the Mobile Report, SC Magazine, and Bleeping Computer for information on these new text messages being sent to T-Mobile and Verizon employees about performing SIM swapping attacks. I believe SIM swapping is going to be increasingly more common, especially if people from mobile carriers are being bribed into performing these attacks. It'll just make it a lot easier. So stay aware, use authenticator apps instead of SMS wherever possible, and stay secure.